the first episode. We're on the first episode of the podcast, Do I Do It? My name's Alayna.
I'm Theo.
And we are your hosts. We get to talk to artists about basically the behind the scenes, why they decided to go for it, the whole question of do I do it? And yeah, we really get to kind of dig in a little bit into the artist's life.
What are we talking about this week?
We had the opportunity to chat with our good friend, Danny Ray Cuhen, and he is a prolific artist in all sorts of different kind of areas. I think in the podcast I said medium singular, and I think the plural...
Mediums.
Mediums? Or is it media?
Mediums. Yeah. With an S.
Okay. Anyways, mediums. So, mind the correction already. I feel like...
That's all right.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, we got to chat with Danny, and he has done all sorts of things, like I said, in all sorts of different mediums, from doing art galleries in New York. He's done NFTs.
He's a musician.
He's a musician.
NFTs. That's, yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah. We talked a bit about the NFT, I think. But, yeah, he's a musician. He's an actor. He's a visual artist, writer, prolific writer. Really interesting guy.
And he's been featured in a recent magazine, digital magazine, called Guy Kojak.
Yes.
So you can find all of his work on guykojak.com. Not all of his work. I shouldn't say that. All is so much of a stretch. But you can find a bunch of his work at guykojak.com. But yeah, otherwise, I hope that you enjoyed the episode. We hope you enjoyed the episode.
We enjoyed the episode.
We had a lot of fun. I mean, we got to talk to him a lot. We asked a lot of questions. I mean, that's our job. But we were able to chat with him about where he comes from, what inspires him, what success looks like. Yeah. He had some really good nuggets. Theo doesn't like it when I call them nuggets.
Anyway, it's a great episode. So
it's a great episode. We hope you enjoy.
Why are we holding you up? Watch the episode.
Watch the episode.
How are you? How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from the lovely London rain
London
that I got
rain.
Caught in,
Yeah.
I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, I got caught in the rain this morning. I was sprinting through the rain, and I arrived at the dog sitter place's house today that I went to go dog sit, and I was, like, soaking wet, and the lady was like, oh, hi! It was really, like, I felt bad. I was walking where I was dripping in her house.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is our first go at this podcast, so it's a pleasure to have you. Our first guest.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited for both of you on this new venture.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that like the theme that we wanted to talk about in general with this is just like getting an idea of the behind the scenes of like the unglamorous side of the arts in a way. And yeah, like what happens before the finished, polished project kind of comes out, and I guess also like the philosophy behind what inspires somebody to do creative things. But I think like I was really interested. I mean, we've chatted about this a few times, like outside of ventures like this, but like you have a really interesting story about like your background and like where you came from in New Mexico and that, and sort of I was interested to hear from you if you could talk a bit about like what kind of environment and culture and like climate you grew up in regarding the arts, and like, you know, like your family and influence on that, and like your peer influence, and just sort of like what was the space that you were living in, and how that maybe influenced your early perception of the arts and creativity.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a very small town in New Mexico, and it's called Deming. It's a desert town. Maybe there's like 20,000 people. There isn't a huge art scene, but I was lucky enough to have a grandfather who I considered like sort of a jack of all trades. He could do anything. He could sing, he could dance, he loved to make these like scorpions out of wire. He used to make jewelry, and he'd make keychains, and he'd make flutes for us as kids out of wood.
I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah, so I just was surrounded by this creative person in my childhood. He raised me as well, so I grew up with him. And he always, even on it, like he worked in the mine, so he spent most of his time working in the mine. But on his time off, he would just be creative, and that's all he did. He sang all day long. Sometimes, especially as a kid, it was very annoying. Now as an adult, I miss it, and I miss hearing him.
Do you find yourself doing it?
I do it a lot, yes.
I feel like that's something that when I was a kid, I found like my grandparents or my mom doing things that I was like, oh, that's so annoying. And now I'm like, oh, that was me just now.
We do become our parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was surrounded by this very creative person, and a lot of my other family members are creative as well. A lot of them are musicians and were in the arts. I had an uncle who would draw with glass. So he had this sort of machine that would chip away glass, and he would do these portraits on glass. It was amazing. So at a very young age, I started singing, drawing, painting, writing.
And your family was like, we love this. This is amazing.
They did foster it, yes, as much as they could. I mean, they always had this idea in their head that I was going to be something special, which was kind of a lot of pressure on me as a young child. I have a twin brother, and they always sort of separated us that way. They looked at him as like the bad one in a way, and I was the good twin. And they put a lot of pressure on me. Well, you're the good one. You're going to do well. You're going to do something with your life. So they did foster like, oh, you like to draw. You like to write. Let's do that.
Was it ever like, how much was creativity seen as like something that's more of a hobby versus something that's like a career or like a proper kind of vocation? And I ask that because like from my experience, I don't mean to say that I was never like supported, but the place that we come from in Saskatchewan in Canada is very much like, it's great to have hobbies, and it's great to have, you enjoy writing or you enjoy dancing or whatever sort of creative artistic expression. It's all great, but it's something to do after work, after you're making money and after that, and it's not something to focus on. In terms of like a pursuit. So like, how does that kind of match with, is that totally the opposite of your experience, or is that closer to what your experience
it's pretty much very similar, even though, I come from a very creative family. They didn't take that stuff seriously because they didn't make money from it. So when I started really wanting to develop myself as an artist, right, this idea of an artist, they didn't really understand what that meant. And even to this day, they don't really understand what that means. And I don't think they fully even know what I do. They know that I've done certain things, and I do think that they're proud of me. I just don't think that they fully understand what I do. And a lot of the time when we're speaking, they sort of gloss over what I do because I don't think they understand it.
Yeah.
To be fair on that point, I have no idea what an engineer does. So, like, I feel like
that's an interesting point, isn't it? Like, that's a really interesting point, Alayna. Like, I mean,
and like, not to dismiss that in any way, but I feel like it's one of those things that I'm like, what if nobody knows what we all do?
True. And that could be just it, that could be it.
Yeah. What if it's not? Yeah. What if it's like, this is such a, okay, I want it to be made clear for like our listeners and viewers that I don't subscribe to like horoscopes myself, and so I don't want to like. I'm bringing up horoscopes. I am about to bring up horoscopes, but it's a rhetorical device that I'm about to use. But like, okay, so I'm a Cancer. I'm told that I'm a Cancer, but anyway, like the idea. The rhetoric around it is like Cancers are like, oh, no one understands me kind of thing. And I feel like that's like a very artist kind of thing to say, is like, no one understands, no one knows what I do. But maybe that's just like what you're saying is like, I like that idea, is like no one really knows what anyone does, because like, unless you do it yourself, right? I couldn't say that I know what an engineer does. I don't know what it's like to be a doctor. what it's actually like to be a doctor in the day in the life. But those are all like, that's kind of what the idea of this podcast is.
I also think with that point, though, too, is that we have so many different like TV shows and that kind of thing, like explaining, okay, here's what a lawyer does, or here's what a policeman does, or whatever. And growing up, that's what's talked about. Yeah. Whereas art was like always kind of a side project, right? You have art class, but like that's what you do. That's the fun class, right? That's what you do, and you go and you get to like do all sorts of things that you want. And I think that kind of leads into a really good question around when you did decide to go into art as an actual kind of career pursuit. What was that decision like? Was it an easy decision, or what did that look like for you?
Or like, was it a decision, like a one kind of decision, or was it several decisions?
I think that for me, I kind of always, even as a kid, knew that this is something that I had inside me. Like, it sounds so cheesy, but I always felt this like drive to create something, whether it was drawing or singing or making films, whatever it was. I've always felt that inside me, and even as a very young kid. And when I was, I think, 8 years old, our school had like a writing competition. And I remember thinking in my head, I want to win, not because I wanted to be the best at something, but because I wanted to be able to tell myself that I could do that I could write something that people would read, right? And I did win, which kind of pushed me to, in my head, think that, okay, I am this person. I am a creative, I am a writer, I'm an artist, whatever, right? So as I started getting older, I continued to push myself into, well, if I could do this, maybe I can do this, and I could try this. And yeah, so I think it became organic in that way, that I just sort of pushed myself into doing these kind of things. Yeah, because by the time I was a teenager, I had fully in my head believed that I was going to be an artist one day, like a working artist, whatever that means.
Yeah. No, that's so cool. And I think like that, I think comes down to that point about doubt. And I think that's one thing. I mean, both Theo and I have our artistic pursuits that we go into, and the amount of times that I'll be working on it and kind of have maybe a tougher day working on my writing or whatever it is, and I'll tell Theo, like, this isn't going to work. I'm not going to be able to do this, and like nobody's going to want to read what I have to say or anything like that. And so did you have that? And I guess, do you still have that? Is that still something that goes through your head, and kind of what do you do about that?
I mean, I think everybody struggles with that. It's a very human thing, but I think a lot of people do what I sort of try to do, is just live with delusion and believe that what you're doing means something, even if it's only for yourself, right? So I usually go into everything that I'm doing with that delusion.
And have you always done that? Is that like, or is that a newer kind of attitude that you have?
No, I've kind of always done that. I remember painting and like drawing in my room as a teenager and thinking, this is going to be like worth so much money one day.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, which artist was it that just paid for things with their art?
With their art. That was Dolly. Yeah. I think Dolly would.
Yeah.
Dolly was notorious for
going for dinner.
Was it you, Danny? Were you telling me this?
No, I don't think it was.
Someone was telling us this.
That's right.
But so then he would go for dinner and like have a really nice dinner, and then just whip out a just sketch and be like,
he'd like sketch something on a napkin and be like, here, that's
and
what it
did pay for it 10 times well. Yeah.
I would love to be able to do that. Could you imagine? You just like whip out your pencil and then you've paid for dinner. Like, that's amazing.
I mean, that's delusional. Like, that's delusional. Really delusional, and yet successful. That's interesting. Like I've adopted a different perspective, and I wonder if it holds me back artistically sometimes, is like, because when I've been in bands and stuff, a lot of my artistic kind of experience have been there, and I've like really pushed back against band members when they talked about this, like, we're going to be the next Led Zeppelin, we're going to be the next whatever, we're going to sell out, we're rock stars kind of thing. And I've really like pushed against that and said, like, I'll be happy. And I've kind of like tried to maintain a mantra of like, I'll be happy if 5 people show up to the show, because it's, and I don't know if that's even true, because like, I'd be really happy if it sold out. Like, I'd be way happier if it sold out.
You wouldn't be crying in the
But it's kind of that, like, it's that like set your expectations super low so that anything that happens will at least meet them, and like anything that goes over it is just great. Like it's just icing on the cake. But do you think that that's like does that kneecap you a little bit as an artist? If like
I don't think so. I think, look, we're all very different people, and we all have our ways of coping with this world that is difficult. It's not, none of it is easy, right? And we're gonna fail so many times, before we are successful, if we even are successful at what we're trying to do. So I don't think there's anything wrong with setting certain expectations, but I think that it's helpful to push yourself out of that, because it's sort of like an insecurity, right? If you set the bar low, then you're not going to feel a certain way if it's not met. But pushing yourself out of that and saying, no, well, okay, maybe it wasn't met now, but I do want to meet this. I want to push for more. I want 1,000 people to show up to my show, not 5, And I think that helps push you to do more, because to be in this type of industry, in any of these industries in the arts, you have to work really, really hard. It's very rare that success is handed to you.
Yeah, like overnight.
Yeah,
that breakout kind of.
That idea is just, it's a myth mostly. It doesn't really happen like that. You have to work really, really hard to get to a level of success that some people get to. So you have to keep pushing yourself. And I think setting expectations is great, but you should always try to push past and expect more.
Yeah.
I think even recently, like some of the very breakout artists in the last little while have been really good. I mean, Chapel Roan comes to mind, where she's like, I was grinding for like 10 years on this. Like, this wasn't like an overnight, I put out an album and like everything went like perfect, right? Or even like Doechie's the similar kind of thing, where she's been like really going at like her work and that kind of thing for the last few years. And so it's not an overnight thing, which I am always very curious about, because I find... We've kind of chatted about this a little bit, but consistency, I feel like, is really hard if you don't have that kind of regular, kind of motivating, like you're doing great, sweetie, kind of vibe.
Like how do you continue to like pour yourself into something when you're not seeing the monetary, or even not even like monetary, but just like the reception, like the idea that you're like screaming into a void kind of thing. I felt that a lot.
Yeah.
So then like, I feel like that's because when we see artists and we see like the finished product of things, you're obviously not encountering something that's not being received because you're receiving it, if that like makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but how do you deal with that process of like just throwing stuff out into the void until something comes back? If that's even an appropriate metaphor, I don't know.
It can be quite soul destructive to constantly put out stuff and not receive at least a acknowledgement for it, right? But what I've always just tried to do is I don't make stuff for anyone other than myself. I am very grateful when people are receptive of my work, or that they like what I'm doing, whatever it is, that I'm working on. But I don't make it for anybody else other than myself. And I know that sounds also kind of like full of shit, but it's true. I of course want people to be receptive of my work. I want people to see it. I want people to like it. But I don't really care if they do. And I think that maybe that's taken years for me to get to that as well. Maybe in my youth, I was more concerned about what people thought. And that kind of suppressed me a little bit. But at this point in my life, I want to create. I feel that in me to make something. So I just do it. And the reward is it being finished.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
I wanted to just come back like really quick before we kind of moved, but like we were talking about success and like this mark of success, and like I think that it's a very like it's a construct. Like, would you agree? Like the idea of success is a construct. But when you were talking about that, like pushing yourself to different milestones, like, you have a show, first you want 5 people to show up, then you want 1,000 people, and then 5,000 or whatever. Is that all success is? Like, do you think that success is just when you say, I'm setting this milestone for myself, and if I hit that milestone, it's successful? right?
Yeah.
Is that it? Or is it more than...
I mean, it could be a lot of things because it's different depending on who you're talking to. You know, society puts us in a box when it comes to success.
Yeah.
You have to accomplish these certain things to be successful in this world. But that doesn't mean that it's relative to everybody. Success to me isn't dependent on how much money I have. Money's great. I love money. I love spending money, but I don't really care about money when it comes to success. You know?
Yeah.
We all need it to survive, especially in this world. And success definitely helps you have that. But success should be about your own personal achievements.
Yeah.
Not what the world puts on you.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I agree with that a lot.
I think that's also really helpful in terms of aspiring artists or artists that are kind of in their very early stages of figuring out if this is kind of a pathway that they're willing to go down. That's really what it comes down to, is like, once you decide that you can do it and that you're going to do it, is that, are you willing to do the weird jobs on the side and like that kind of thing? Have you done that? Have you worked some like weird ones?
Absolutely. Yeah,
what would you say is like the craziest?
When I was living in New York, I was going to university. And then, so, you know, I wasn't making money going to university. So I was working as a cleaner, house cleaner.
Oh, cool.
My time off. So I would go and clean people's houses on my time off. And then I was working in the film industry as well. So if I wasn't on set, like I was working for Viacom doing digital shorts for BET, if I wasn't doing that, then I was cleaning houses, which is, you know, it was I'd be one day interviewing rappers, and the next day I'd be cleaning somebody's toilet.
Wow.
Just like the duality of life a little
bit.
Exactly.
But I had to do that because I was living in New York, and any extra cash, I needed it, right?
Yeah.
No, for sure. Yeah. I mean, both Theo and I have spent a lot of time in restaurant. That's not weird, for sure. But in Canada, it's a lot better for like tip structure and that kind of thing, which is amazing. So that keeps a lot of artists afloat that we know. Yeah, I worked with a couple of artists now who have been able to kind of break out of that and be able to make art their primary income. And that's been so exciting to watch, because you can get kind of stuck in those jobs if you don't have your break kind of thing, right?
Definitely. It is. That's one of the hardest things. The arts overall don't pay well. So you do kind of have to do other jobs, and sometimes you can get stuck doing that, and then you can get comfortable doing that, and then you kind of lose your drive to do the arts or to do whatever it is that you want to do outside of what you need to do to survive.
Yeah. One thing that I did find, though, is that when I worked restaurant, I was the most inspired that I've been, probably creatively, because of the fact that I had so much time to think about the fact that I wanted to be doing it. And I felt like that really was the most time that I was the most active in my writing and that kind of thing. And Theo and I were talking about that earlier, actually, because it's one of those things where even when you're doing the job and you're serving the customer or whatever it comes down to, then in the back of your mind, you're kind of gathering inspiration. A few years ago, Theo worked at a metal scrapyard, and he came back with so much inspiration all the time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, like, I think that that's like a lot of these jobs are, I don't know, like if I had an artist or a writer or something to quote, I would quote them, but I'm sure someone said this, is that like those jobs are what fuel or what like add inspiration to
I was just very grateful to be able to even work those jobs, because it helped me survive. And I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with working any of these type of jobs. I think, you know, we all have to do what we have to do. And unfortunately, some of us are more privileged than others, and some of us are not. And some of us have to grind hard and work multiple jobs or do certain things we wouldn't necessarily want to do to survive.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I worked 3 jobs in university. I'd go back to back to back, and it was like one of those things. I definitely get that, though. Yeah. But I look back at that, and I feel like I've got a lot of inspiration from that, though. Being able to be very nostalgic about that period of time, which is good, and I am grateful for that, though, too.
Yeah. So what, like, when you go back to, so you've been living in London for 5 years. 5 years. And before that was in the States. And so, like, what were some of the things in the States that you did that you felt like were like benchmark moments of success? according to that definition of success that we've established here.
Yeah. I was very proud of myself when I started working in the film industry because I come from nothing, right? And I, growing up, only dreamt of living a certain life, right? I dreamt of living in New York City. I dreamt of meeting certain people, right? So when I moved to New York City and broke into that industry and was working with certain people, not that their value matters to me in my value, but it was like a proud moment that I was able to achieve something that I dreamt of, right? And I don't think I would have been able to get there if I didn't push myself. I didn't have my family giving me money to survive. I had to do a lot of stuff on my own, which wasn't easy, but it definitely, I was lucky. And I feel so grateful and lucky in life to have been able to do some of the things that I've done, and to have been able to work with some of the people that I've worked with. I've worked with some amazing, talented people in the world, and I'm so grateful for that.
So yes, you've done a lot of things in terms of your artistic career, and I made a list, aside from the stuff that we've talked about, kind of you and I, but just the other things that we've been able to find about you, your resume. But we've got music. You're a very talented singer. You've got music out.
Thank you.
And then you've done gallery showings in New York. You do visual art. You've got NFTs out as well, with a very distinct style that's very you, and it's very cool that way. You did a K-pop channel, which I also love, or it was a show, and that one was very successful as well. You did an amazing job with that. You do writing, and then now a digital magazine.
Yeah, digital magazine. I heard about. Well, I don't know if that was you were connected with that somehow, with that guy Kojak.
I don't know if we're supposed to talk about that.
We require no intermediaries. Our voice is our own, and yours should be too. We exist in a moment saturated with noise, accelerated imagery, hollow signals, language drained of consequence. The digital world expands by the hour, yet with each new layer it grows more vacant. A spectacle of presence without substance. But when the spectacle collapses, as all facades do, what remains is what has always endured. The mind, the vision, the necessity of creation. This is not a brand, it is not a lifestyle, it is a stance. We are Guy Kojak, a digital magazine dedicated to showcasing creators across all disciplines. But what we do is less about format and more about what drives it. Creativity, as we understand it, is not ornamental. It does not sit politely in galleries or bow before institutions. We see creativity as a force that moves through everything: design, language, movement, sound, systems. We believe the digital domain should belong to its architects, the makers, the thinkers, the ones who shape something from nothing. It must not be governed by the formulas of commerce or the slow death of legacy. It must remain wild, intelligent, and awake. We are drawn to those who create because they cannot do otherwise, not for approval, not for applause, but because it is how they make sense of being here. Those who write in the dark, build in silence, express without audience, because for them, quiet is not peace, it is absence. We do not chase attention, we move by observation. We're drawn to what's overlooked. We're listening, not to the loudest voice, but to the most honest one. If these words find you, you've already joined us. You are Guy Kojak. We are Guy Kojak. Enter the signal. www.guykojak.com.
In terms terms of all of these kind of things, did you have kind of guiding inspirations for each one of the different avenues that you've gone down? Or is it just kind of like, do you feel, how does that work for you? Because you have touched on so many different medium.
I don't know. When it came to music, my grandfather, as I said before, he was a singer, and he was very talented, and I always looked up to him and his ability to just sing on command. And like, he had no shame. He would sing everywhere and anywhere in front of anyone. So when I decided that I wanted to pursue that sort of path, I just kind of thought of him and thought of like, well, what would he do if he was given these opportunities? Mm-hmm. So I was living in California at the time, and I had reached out to a producer. And so that's how I first started making music. I was working with a producer in California. His name is Matthews. He's very talented. He's like the coolest studio too. It was like in his house, but he like had all these rooms that were made to record music. And he played every instrument you could think of. He's very talented. So that's how I sort of started making music. And then I got a vocal coach and like tried to take it seriously. Then I moved to New York, and that's when I got in a band, and we were like doing little shows here and there, and yeah, it was fun.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And so then what was the like the prompt to move to London? What was that kind of?
Well, I got married.
Of course.
Yeah, I was.
We all follow a passion, really. Let's go.
Right. The passion of love.
Yeah.
I was living in the States, and I'd met my husband. We met on Instagram actually, and I had a party in Amsterdam. It was my friend's 40th birthday, so my husband and I had been talking on Instagram for years, maybe 3 years, something like that. And by the time this party was happening, we were kind of talking a little more seriously. We were like FaceTiming and stuff. So I, just invited him to Amsterdam. So he came, and we met for the first time on that trip. And within 4 days we got engaged, and within 2 months we got married.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
That's awesome.
And he's from Scotland. He's a lawyer here in London. He wanted to live in London. So that's what brought me here.
Okay. Yeah. Was he living in London?
He was in Scotland when we first met, but he moved here while we were together.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. So you guys both kind of moved to London.
He moved, 8 months before I did, I think.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
That's amazing. That's such a great story. Yeah. Also, the fact that you talked for a while, and then like once you met, it became very committed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think London it's an interesting, how do you find that like difference between London and New York as like a creative person? Like, is there, well, there must be a difference, but what do you see? What do you see that as?
In my experience, I've always felt that London is a very difficult city to navigate for anybody in the sort of career world space, whatever you want to call it. But especially in the arts, I feel like in any city, in any part of the world, you have to have you have to know people to get in, doors open for you. But I feel like in London, it's really that. It's very difficult.
I think London also is just so big. I think everything is very neighborhood focused, right? That's what I've found since living here is that, we all live in Southeast, which is amazing, and we do love Southeast, but it's definitely, I've never been to North London.
Yeah.
We've been here for a year and a half, and I have never been to North London. So
it's quite a trek up there.
It's a trek. And that's the thing is that even when we go visit friends in West London, it's a day activity.
Yeah.
It's quite far. And I know that that's even in LA, driving in traffic and stuff, it can take you an hour and a half, 2 hours. But still, it's just different here that way, is that it does take a lot of energy to do that. So if you do have an artistic community that is within the same neighborhood, then it's great. But I think that it's just it can be fragmented that way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, I think it's just because it's interesting because our experience is coming from a very small center as well. And you have, you've had more experience.
Not as small, but
not as, what do you mean?
Well, Saskatoon is is not that small
compared to
what's it called?
Deming.
Deming is very small.
Deming on the map.
Yeah. But like, I think that, do you find in like the center, like, I think that like coming from Saskatoon, I just felt like, I've felt more capable of doing creative things in London, even though, like, and I agree with you, it's hard to get in, but like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you think it's possible, like, how hard is it to be a creative person when you're not in a massive center like New York or London or LA or something like that?
I think it doesn't matter so much anymore. The reality is, because of the internet, you don't have to be in a certain space to be a part of it anymore. So that's great. That's one of the best parts about the internet and social media, is being able to, it opens the world up for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have loved to watch, especially since 2020. I feel like that's been a really good kind of kickoff in terms of seeing people go and turn. I saw a TikTok the other day of someone who was like, I made up my job, basically. Mm-hmm. I draw where people first met their partner. And I'm like, that is so cool, because in reality, like, that's an artistic medium that she was able to make into something that can support her life, and she's clearly passionate about it, and it actually serves other people, and it's all these things, you know what I mean? There's all sorts of just like pro to that. But if it was a very traditional kind of trajectory, that wouldn't have been the case, right? But I think that is super exciting. It does feel very saturated at the same time, though. How do you feel about saturation? What's your kind of attitude towards that idea?
I mean, I think that's just the hardest thing we all have to overcome, right? There is so much out there. And so how do you sort of pave your space so that people follow or like or share or subscribe or whatever it is that you're trying to get from that? It's difficult. It is. And, with algorithms and all this stuff that we're now forced to deal with as people on social media, it just makes it even harder to sort of pave your path in that space. But, I mean, everyone has the option to do it, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the best part about it. Yeah. It's not excluded. It's not exclusive.
Yeah, right? I mean, here we are starting a podcast.
Yeah.
I say saturated space, and really, like, a podcast is a saturated space.
Very, yeah.
But, I mean, at the same time, I also really enjoy podcast. I feel like it's one of those things that's, like, really exciting. And I think, like, in terms of coming up with what's next, I do feel like, even from my perspective, there was just, for me, I was like, I feel like this is something that I would be really excited about, and I will stay consistent with it. And I feel like that's really the asterisk for me, is that I'm like, okay, if I can stay consistent with this, then it's something that'll go forward, because, like we've talked about before, it's not going to go like a one shot. Oh, you did one video and now you're, thriving out there. It's not going to work. So yeah.
I just wonder, like, I think about, like, as a writer and that kind of thing, like, with AI being the new, because, okay, so what I'm trying to say is that there's all this content, and there's this, like, massive market for content generation, and it's about that, like, SEO, search engine optimization kind of space. Alayna knows about this more than I do. But, like, the act of writing, and even being paid to write or something, is being sort of, like, transformed so that it's not about the actual writing, but it's about, like, hitting those search terms kind of thing. And now, like, AI is being used to do that. And, like, I feel like when we talk about the saturation of things, like, on the internet, a lot of it that is oversaturating is that kind of content that's not really even meant to be, like, consumed or read or enjoyed or anything. It's just out there to, like, fill space kind of thing. So I feel like that, like, I don't know, do you think that that's what we're, as artists, what we're fighting against in the internet, in the digital kind of space, is what we're fighting for real estate space is against those kind of things?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we live in a capitalist world, and, so all of these sort of capitalist driven companies, well, they do take up most space. Mm-hmm. And, they're the ones that make the money. So we are fighting to just survive them in the sea of them, right?
Yeah. And in a way, impress them. I mean, the amount of money that comes from organizations and stuff that goes to arts, that does help, right? And I think... actually, there was a period of time where Theo was very interested in and invested in this idea of creating very traditional salons, where you have like the artists, and then you also have the business people and the kind of socialite people and that kind of thing all mixing and mingling, because that's what happened. What time period
that's
of that?
like the Enlightenment. If you look at the, like I'm still,
we're taking it back.
I'm still interested. I mean, the Enlightenment and the Romantic Age, and I mean, this has been the case. It's been the case all the way up until today, really. But the idea of, and that's kind of what I want to create with this too, is this idea that we have a space where artists kind of come together and talk in an informal way. But what you're saying is this idea that artists come and then the patrons of the arts come to the same space, and they each have something to share with each other. One of them has capital and finance, the ability to finance things, and then the artist has the product. But I don't know. I don't like that idea of art as a product, kind of.
That's an interesting point.
I don't know.
But it is, even at the end of the day, it always will be a product, right?
Yeah.
And every artist wants to sell their work at the end of the day, regardless if it's music, our drawing, our painting, our digital. We all want to sell our work somehow, it's,
in reality, that is a piece of recognition for that, right? I mean, not that devalues if you don't sell it.
Yeah.
But it's just that's what our marker in our current society is for valuation, right? Is that financial? What can you sell your work for, right? Even though there's so many different pieces that go into that, right? The way that things are marketed and the way things are positioned and that kind of thing. But it is, I think, it naturally is a product right now.
It's inevitable. I'm not saying it's going to change.
And it won't, because it's always been a product. Even if you think of, in the past, how art was used, it was to it was like a historical thing. It wasn't used to be I'm going to paint my feelings. They didn't really do that in the past. They made paintings of royals and things like that.
Yeah, and historical events.
And historical events, right? Yeah. That's what art was used for, and that was commissioned.
Yeah. And it was valued. Maybe that's the issue. Maybe that's the issue that I have. It's not the idea of art as a product, but it's the idea of artists not being given what they're worth, right? Not being paid what their product is worth and that.
Yeah, and I think that's where oversaturation comes in. There are a lot of people on this planet. There's a lot of artists, and not everybody's going to be able to make a lot of money off of it, right? And we have to accept that, It could be you and it could not be you. And that's okay. It shouldn't make you feel less about yourself or your work if you don't get that, success that you think you should get.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think over time, as I've gotten a little bit older and in my career and that kind of thing, because I do work in marketing, because as I've gotten through that, it has shifted my perspective on the way that art is, right? Because the art that I do see, especially easily see and that kind of thing, is very much just because of the way that it's marketed, right?
Yeah.
And how has that kind of shifted as you've continued through your artistic career? How has that perspective been? Did that change from the time you started to now?
Yeah, it did. Social media changed it a lot too, right? The idea that you can market yourself and be successful because of that sort of avenue, right? You can go on social media, you can post your work, you can get followers, you can get likes, you can have people buy your work even from social media. So I think that definitely changed everybody's perspective on how do I market myself, right? I don't know if people thought about that as much before, but how do I market myself? How do I market what I'm making? How do I market what I'm creating? And how do I get it to the masses so that I can make a living off this?
Yeah. And I think that would be a really good kind of thing to think about in terms of, especially as you're starting, right? Because we've kind of talked about how community is so important with that, but being able to kind of drive that through social media is also valuable. And so what is your kind of advice? If you were starting out now, what would be your advice in terms of building that network, that community for the arts for yourself?
I think the best thing that anybody can do is to just go out there and meet people and talk to people and share as much as you can.
Yeah.
Getting out there and putting your work out there is the only way it's going to be seen at this point, right? And it's just how you got to do it. You just got to go out there, meet as many people as you can, network. I have a friend. She's a painter here in London. She's very talented, and she's represented by a gallery space, but she's very shy and she doesn't know how to approach people. So every now and then she'll invite me out to a showing and she wants me to watch me how I talk with the crowd, right? How I interact with people. And she says it's been helpful for her because she's seeing that it can be done, right? It's not that I'm better at it or anything like that. It's just that I can do it because I do it. Yeah. Right. I just do it.
I think that's the other thing. We've talked a lot about networking events and that kind of thing, but because I come from the business world, we are very much taught how to network through our university and our early career and that kind of thing, because you go to these events. We actually had this course. I don't know if every university does this, but we had this course where we were taught how to hold a glass and a plate in the same hand so that you could shake someone's hand, which is incredible. But so then that way you have like the etiquette around networking. But even then, there's still some people that I know who are like, oh, these events are so boring. And I'm like, well, I mean, I guess if you don't like engage with people in an interesting way, they'll be boring, because anything will be boring if you make it boring, right? But the thing about it is that I had a conversation with a friend about this like 2 years ago, and he said, like, how do you get out of that? Oh, what do you do? Oh, how long? Cool. Are you going away this winter? Like, how do you get out of that, right?
Yeah,
like
the small talk traps.
Yeah, but the small talk traps that don't get you anywhere, you know what I mean? And what I told him is I was like, go in and be open. Because if you're not willing to be open, they're not going to be open. So it's basically like you've got two walls talking to each other, right? And whatever's written on that wall is going to be what shows. But you need to go in with that attitude of kind of, I said, even if you prepare 3 questions that are interesting, right? I said, you like to read? Talk about that. You could say, oh, I've been reading this book recently. Do you like to read? Whatever. If that doesn't hit home, okay, I know you like to work out, right? Why don't you talk about a workout that you did or something that's going on moving forward? Just interests that you can kind of build those connections with people, because then that way you can get into deeper topics. Yeah,
and you should never be afraid to just talk about the things that you want to talk about. Like if you're there to get people to like know more about something you're working on, there's nothing wrong with talking about that. And if people want to listen, they will. And if they don't, then you'll know that they don't, and you can talk to somebody else. Yeah.
I'm kind of notorious at events where I just bumble around, and especially if I'm introducing people, then I'm just like, oh, this person did this cool thing. Then I think that you'd be interested because they did this cool thing. Anyways, bye. So I do that a lot. I'm actually so bad for that. I just ping pong around the room.
Well, that's good though. I mean, people like you help drive conversation, so that's great.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about Derek Jarman. I recently learned about him, but I understand that you're inspired by him a bit. And there's something you wrote that I copied, if I can read it. Mm-hmm. It's just quick, but it's then. So Jarman was a wild garden, and I am too. I am free to roam through the garden of my own making, unaffected by the pressure of success, and driven by the enjoyment found within creativity. This walled garden is a screening of my life. I thought that was beautiful.
No, thank you.
And I really loved it. But I was interested. I mean, there's so much about that we've talked about too, like this unaffected by the pressure of success. We've kind of touched on all these themes in this conversation, but I was wondering, could you talk about that idea of inspiration from Philip Jarman and like
Derek Jarman.
Sorry, Derek Jarman.
I don't know where Philip came from.
I don't know. I was just going.
Thinking about Phil.
Dear Phil. But yeah, like I read up on him last night, and so I just learned about. But maybe you could share his influence on you and.
Well, the first time I was exposed to him, I was in New York City, and I'd gotten invited to a screening of this film that he made called Blue.
Right. Yeah.
And I just thought it was beautiful. And, it's about 90 minutes long of just a blue screen, but he has this monologue underneath that it's just beautiful. It's about his life, about certain things that he's dealing with. And I think that it really inspired me to rethink how I imagined a story should be sort of viewed as a viewer, right? And it's kind of stuck with me. I don't know. He's stuck with me ever since that moment. And I've read a few of his books, and he was from the United Kingdom, so being here kind of like makes me feel closer to him in a way. So yeah, I do think about his work a lot. In the context of like, I want to be able to make things that I'm proud of. And I think that he made things he was proud of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think even in terms of format, there was a poem that you wrote in the digital magazine, Guy Kojak, that there's a video of your eyes that like half of your face is kind of shadowed out and the other half, and then you're reading part of the poem and it overlaps and it kind of, there's repeating and overlapping and that kind of thing. And it's a different medium completely in terms of the way people understand poetry and the way people understand film and that kind of thing. Right. So I think that that's a really cool kind of reflection on that too, even the way that you kind of take inspiration and put it out in a way that people aren't expecting. Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about that idea of the garden. So like Jarman was a wild garden, and that, what is that like? What are you doing with that imagery? This and also this thing about the walled garden is screening. Like when you say screening, is that like film or like what's sort of what's the notion of behind? I'm kind of doing a close reading of the poem, if you don't mind. Like, I think it's such an interesting.
When I wrote it, I was, it started off that sort of piece talking about the film Blue, and he also wrote a lot about gardens, right? He had a garden in Dungeness. And he wrote a book about that. And I love that book. So when I went to this garden, it's in Brockwell Park. It's the walled garden in Brockwell Park. And I was sort of thinking about Derek Jarman. And it's kind of just what it came to when I started writing. And just when I think of his career and the things that he did, he sort of wasn't afraid to just do something. If he wanted to make a film, he made a film. He wrote. He wasn't afraid to put himself in different mediums and to try different things. And I've always related to that because I feel like I am the same way. I'm not afraid to put myself in something that I haven't done as much of, right? Or that I might not be that confident in. So I think that's what that ending is about.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of or read or both she's American. Well, she's a Caribbean American writer, Jamaica Kincaid.
I've heard of, yeah.
Yeah. She has, I think it's sort of an essay, short story, novella thing. It's called My Garden. I'm pretty sure it's the name of it. I encountered it last year, but she uses this. Part of it is this idea of the garden as being like a metaphor for colonial spaces. And she's from Antigua, I think. But then she, of course, or her ancestry is from Antigua, but she was born in the United States. And it's about this notion of like, but the garden being a space that is either well manicured